Aliens were ready for battle. They weren't ready for mankind. Part 1. First contact, the Valorian Dominion had conquered 17 star systems. They had done this over 300 years. No species had ever stopped them. No world had ever refused to kneel. Their ships were perfect. Their soldiers were perfect. Their plans were perfect. High Commander Zorath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Victory. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 eyes that saw in spectrums humans could not imagine. Behind him, hundreds of officers worked in perfect silence. They did not need to speak. The Valorians shared a kind of mental link. They thought as one. They acted as one. This was their greatest strength. "The probe data is complete," said his second officer. "The planet is called Earth by its inhabitants. They are primitive. They still use chemical rockets. They have nuclear weapons but no shields. They will fall quickly." Zorath studied the images on his screen. A blue and green world. Oceans and continents. Cities that glowed at night with primitive electricity. It was beautiful in its own small way. It would make a fine addition to the Dominion. "How many of them are there?" he asked. 8 billion. Zorath blinked all 4 eyes. That was a large number. Most species they conquered had populations in the hundreds of millions. But numbers meant nothing against superior technology. 1 billion primitives were still primitives. "Send the standard subjugation fleet," he ordered. 40 dreadnoughts. 200 support vessels. We will give them the standard choice. Submit or die. The fleet launched 3 days later. It would take them 6 months to reach Earth. Zorath did not bother to go himself. This was routine work. His captains had done it many times before. What Zorath did not understand, what none of the Valorians understood, was that Earth was not like other worlds. The first sign of trouble came when they began to study human communications more closely. The Valorians had excellent translation software. Within weeks, they could understand every human language. And that was the problem. There were too many languages. Over 7,000 of them. The Valorians had one language. Every species they had conquered had one language, or at most 2 or 3. But humans had thousands. "This makes no sense," said the chief analyst. "How do they communicate? How do they organize? How do they function as a civilization?" The deeper they looked, the more confused they became. Humans had no central government. They had hundreds of countries, all with different leaders and different laws. They were constantly fighting each other. At any given moment, there were dozens of wars happening on their planet. Small wars, but still wars. And yet they had built cities that touched the sky. They had split the atom. They had sent machines to other planets. They had mapped their own genetic code. How was this possible? How could such a divided, chaotic species accomplish anything? The fleet commander, Captain Thrall, sent a message back to Zorath. "These creatures are strange. They appear to be at war with themselves. Perhaps we should wait until they destroy each other." Zorath's reply was simple. "Proceed as planned. They are primitives. Their internal conflicts will only make them easier to conquer. A divided enemy cannot resist." The fleet entered Earth's solar system on a Tuesday in March. They passed the outer planets without stopping. They passed Mars, where human robots rolled across the red dust. They took up position in orbit around Earth, their ships blocking out the stars. Then they sent their message. It was broadcast on every frequency, in every language. Every television on Earth showed the same image. The Valorian fleet, vast and terrible against the blackness of space. And then High Commander Zorath himself appeared, his gray face filling the screens of 8 billion humans. "People of Earth," he said, "I am High Commander Zorath of the Valorian Dominion. We have conquered 17 star systems. No species has ever defeated us. No species has ever resisted us successfully. We offer you a choice. Submit to our rule, and you will be allowed to live as servants of the Dominion. Refuse, and your world will be destroyed. You have one day to decide. The transmission ended. The Valorians waited. They expected panic. They expected chaos. They expected to see humans turning on each other, fighting over who would surrender first. They were right about the chaos. But they were wrong about everything else. In Washington, the president called an emergency meeting. In Moscow, the Russian leader did the same. In Beijing, in London, in Paris, in New Delhi, in Tokyo, in 100 capitals around the world, leaders gathered and argued and shouted at each other. They had been enemies for centuries. They had fought world wars. They had pointed nuclear weapons at each other for decades. They disagreed about almost everything, but on this one thing, they agreed. The American president spoke first at the United Nations. We have received the alien demand. They want us to surrender. They want us to become slaves. He paused. I have spoken with every major leader on this planet. We have our differences. God knows we have our differences. But we all agree on one thing. We will not surrender. Not today. Not ever. The Russian leader stood next. We've been enemies with the West for many years. But we are all humans. And humans do not kneel. The Chinese representative added, we will fight. Together. One by one, every nation gave their answer. Some were eloquent. Some were simple. The Australian Prime Minister simply said, tell them to get stuffed. The response was broadcast back to the Valorian fleet. It came in 100 languages, from 100 nations. But the message was the same. Captain Thrall watched the human broadcast with growing confusion. This had never happened before. Every species they had encountered had surrendered when they saw the fleet. Every single one. Some had tried to negotiate. Some had tried to fight. But all of them had been terrified. All of them had understood that resistance was hopeless. These humans were clearly terrified too. He could see it in their faces. But they were refusing anyway. They are bluffing, Thrall said to his officers. They will change their minds when we begin the attack. Prepare the landing forces. We will teach them the price of defiance. The invasion of Earth began the next morning. The Valorians had no idea what they were getting into. Aliens were ready for battle. They weren't ready for mankind. Part 2. The Chaos Variable. The Valorian dropships descended through Earth's atmosphere like metal rain. There were thousands of them. Each one carried 100 soldiers in perfect black armor. Each soldier had trained for decades. Each one knew exactly what to do. The plan was simple. Land in the major cities. Destroy the military bases. Kill anyone who resisted. The humans would see their armies fall, and they would surrender. This was how it always worked. The first dropships landed in New York City. The soldiers marched out in perfect formation, their weapons humming with deadly energy. They expected screaming civilians. They expected a few brave but foolish soldiers with primitive guns. What they found was a taxi driver named Mikhail, who had grown up in Soviet Russia. He had survived things that would break most people. When he saw the alien soldiers marching down Fifth Avenue, he did not run. He got in his taxi, drove it straight at them at full speed, and jumped out at the last second. The taxi exploded. 3 Valorian soldiers died. Mikhail became the first human to kill an alien invader. He would not be the last. Across the world, the same story repeated itself. Not because humans had a plan. Not because anyone had told them what to do. But because humans were simply not built to surrender. In Moscow, a retired physics teacher named Yuri watched the Valorian ships land from his apartment window. He had spent 40 years teaching young people about electricity and magnetism. He knew things. He went down to the basement of his building, found the electrical systems, and started to work. 3 hours later, when a Valorian landing craft flew over his neighborhood, it suddenly lost power and crashed into the street. Yuri had created an electromagnetic pulse using nothing but car batteries and old radio equipment. He had learned how to do this from a book he had read 20 years ago, but the Valorians could not understand how this was possible. Their ships had shields. Their technology was centuries ahead of anything humans had. But Yuri had found a weakness. And within hours, instructions for building similar devices were spreading across the internet. In Lagos, Nigeria, a group of teenagers had been playing with drones for years. They had modified them, improved them, made them faster and smarter. When the aliens invaded, they used those same drones to spy on enemy positions. They shared what they learned on social media. Other groups in other cities saw their posts and copied their methods. The Valorians had no concept of social media. They could not understand how information was spreading so fast. Their own communication was controlled and ordered. But human communication was like water, flowing around every obstacle, filling every gap. In São Paulo, Brazil, something even stranger happened. A street gang and a police unit had been fighting each other for 10 years. They had killed each other's friends. They hated each other more than words could say. But when the aliens landed in their neighborhood, something changed. Nobody spoke. Nobody made a peace agreement. But when the Valorian soldiers came, both groups attacked them from different sides. The gang members knew the streets better than anyone. The police had better weapons. Together, they killed 30 aliens in one night. When the sun rose, the gang leader and the police captain looked at each other across a street covered in alien bodies. The captain nodded. The gang leader nodded back. Then they went their separate ways. This was what the Valorians could not compute. They had models for everything. They had studied 1,000 species. But none of their models included enemies who would fight each other and fight invaders at the same time. None of their models included chaos that somehow still functioned. Captain Threll stood in his command center, watching reports come in from around the world. Red lights covered the map. Each red light was a problem. Each red light was a unit that had been destroyed or was taking heavy casualties. "This is impossible," he said. "We have superior technology. We have superior training. We have superior numbers in every engagement. How are we losing?" His tactical officer tried to explain. "The humans do not fight like other species. They do not wait for orders. Each group makes its own decisions. They adapt to our tactics within minutes. When we block one attack, 10 more appear somewhere else, then predict where the attacks will come from. We cannot. There is no pattern. There is no central command. Each human unit operates independently." Captain Thrall felt something he had never felt before. It was frustration. No, it was more than that. It was the beginning of fear. In a small village in Vietnam, a grandmother named Lin remembered stories her own grandmother had told her. Stories about fighting invaders in the jungle. Stories about tunnels and traps and patience. She gathered her village. They dug tunnels. They set traps. When the Valorian patrol came through, they vanished into the earth. The aliens found nothing. Then, one by one, they started to die. A hole covered with leaves. A sharpened stick. A rope that pulled them into the darkness. The Valorians called for support. But by the time it arrived, the village was empty. The humans had melted away like ghosts. A 12-year-old boy in Germany noticed something while watching footage of the aliens on television. Their armor had a small gap at the neck. He posted about it online. He made a diagram. He shared it everywhere he could. Within 24 hours, resistance fighters on 6 continents were aiming for that gap. Alien soldiers started dying from shots that should not have been fatal. The Valorian High Command could not understand how this had happened. Their armor design was secret. But secrets meant nothing on a planet where 8 billion people could share information instantly. After 1 month of fighting, Captain Thrall sent a message to High Commander Zorath. His words were simple and unprecedented in Valorian history. We require reinforcements. The humans are not surrendering. They are not breaking. Every soldier we kill creates 10 more enemies. Every city we destroy becomes a symbol that makes them fight harder. We have never encountered anything like this. Please advise. Zorath read the message 3 times. He could not believe what he was seeing. His perfect fleet, his perfect soldiers, were being defeated by primitives with chemical guns and homemade explosives. He did not understand yet, but he was beginning to learn. Humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new, something dangerous, something that did not know how to give up. Aliens were ready for battle. They weren't ready for mankind. Part 3. The Madness of Hope 6. Months had passed since the invasion began. The Valorian Dominion had sent more ships. They had sent more soldiers. They had used weapons that could level mountains. They had poisoned water supplies and burned forests. They had killed millions of humans. And still, humanity refused to break. High Commander Zorath had come to Earth himself now. He stood in a command bunker that had been built in what was once Central Park in New York City. The trees were gone. The grass was gone. Everything was gray metal and black glass. From here, he directed the conquest of an entire world. But it was not going well. "Show me the latest reports," he ordered. His officers brought up maps and numbers and graphs. All of them told the same story. The Dominion controlled the major cities. They controlled the skies. They controlled the oceans. On paper, they were winning. But beneath the surface, in the mountains and the forests and the underground tunnels, humans were still fighting. And they were getting better at it. "They have reverse-engineered our energy weapons," an officer reported. "We have found human-made copies in resistance camps. They are crude but functional. They have cracked our communication encryption," another officer added. "They can hear everything we say." Zorath closed all 4 of his eyes. This should not be possible. The encryption used by the Dominion had never been broken. It was based on mathematics that humans should not understand for another 1,000 years. "How?" he asked. "We captured one of their cryptographers, a woman from a place called Switzerland. She explained that humans have been breaking codes for centuries. They have competitions where they try to break each other's most secure systems. They do it for fun." Zorath did not understand the word fun in this context. Why would anyone break codes for enjoyment? It made no sense. But very little about humans made sense. The thing that bothered Zorath most was not the resistance. It was not the clever tricks or the stolen technology. It was something else. Something he had observed and captured. Footage and intercepted messages. Humans were still laughing. He had watched a video of soldiers in a destroyed building. They had no food. They had almost no ammunition. Half of their friends were dead. And they were laughing at a joke one of them had told. He had seen photographs of children playing in the ruins of bombed cities. He had read letters that humans sent to each other, full of love and hope and plans for the future. He had seen a wedding held in an underground bunker, the bride wearing a dress made from parachute cloth. "They should be broken," Zora said to his chief advisor. "Every psychological model we have says they should have given up months ago. No species can endure this much loss and keep fighting. It is not possible." His advisor, an old Valorian named Korath, had spent more time studying humans than anyone else. He chose his words carefully. "I believe I understand it now, High Commander. Humans have a concept they call hope. It is not like our concept of calculation, where we weigh the chances of success and act accordingly. Human hope exists even when there is no logical reason for it. They hope when all evidence says they should despair. That is madness. Yes, but it is a madness that makes them very dangerous. In a hidden laboratory under the Swiss Alps, a team of scientists worked 20 hours a day. They had captured Valorian equipment and taken it apart piece by piece. They had studied the alien metal, the alien circuits, the alien power sources. Now they were building. Dr. Sarah Chun was their leader. She had been a professor of physics before the invasion. Now she was something else. She had not slept more than 4 hours a night in 6 months. Her hands shook from too much coffee. Her eyes were red and tired. But she kept working. The power coupling is still unstable, one of her team members said. It might explode. Then we will build another one, Sarah replied. And another one after that. We keep building until we get it right. That is what we do. She thought about her daughter, who was somewhere in Canada with Sarah's parents. She thought about the world her daughter would grow up in. Would it be free? Would it be enslaved? Everything depended on what they built in this laboratory. On the other side of the world, in a refugee camp in Kenya, a young woman named Amara was teaching children to read. The camp had no electricity. They had very little food. Valorian patrols flew overhead every few hours, but Amara had books. She had gathered them from ruined libraries and abandoned schools. And every day, she sat under a tree and taught the children their letters. Why do we need to learn this? A boy asked. The aliens might kill us tomorrow. Maybe they will, Amara said. But maybe they will not. And if they do not, you will need to know how to read. You will need to rebuild the world. And you cannot rebuild anything if you cannot read. This was happening everywhere. Humans were not just fighting. They were living. They were falling in love. They were having children. They were planting gardens and painting pictures and writing songs. They were refusing to let the invasion destroy what made them human. A Valorian officer named Prellis was tasked with understanding human morale. He spent weeks studying their culture, their art, their music. He watched their movies. He read their books. He listened to their songs. And slowly, something strange happened to him. He found himself moved by a human song about loss and love. He felt tears in his eyes, though Valorians did not cry. He watched a human film about a small group fighting against impossible odds, and he wanted them to win. He went to Zorath with his report. I understand them now, he said, but I must warn you. Understanding them has changed me. I am no longer certain that we should conquer them. Zorath had Prellis removed from duty. He was afraid of what the officer had become. But the question Prellis had raised stayed in Zorath's mind. These humans were not just enemies. They were something beautiful and terrible and completely new. And for the first time in his 300 years of conquest, Zorath wondered if he might be on the wrong side of this war. He pushed the thought away. He had a job to do, but the thought did not disappear completely. It stayed in the corner of his mind, waiting. Meanwhile, in laboratories and hidden bases and mountain caves, humanity was preparing something. They had been learning. They had been building. And soon, they would be ready to fight back. Not just to survive, but to win. Aliens were ready for battle. They weren't ready for mankind. Part 4. The turning tide 1 year after the invasion began. Humanity struck back. It started at midnight, on a night with no moon. Across the world, in 1,000 different locations, humans looked at their watches and waited. They had been planning this for months. They had communicated in codes and whispers. They had hidden their preparations from Valorian censors and spies. Now it was time. In Seoul, South Korea, a team of hackers sat in a basement surrounded by computers. They had spent 6 months studying Valorian networks. They had learned the alien programming languages. They had found the weaknesses. At exactly midnight, they launched their attack. High Commander Zorath was asleep in his command bunker when the alarm started. He rushed to the control room and found chaos. Screens were flickering. Systems were shutting down. Officers were shouting in confusion. "What is happening?" He demanded. "We are under cyber attack," his technical officer said. "They have penetrated our main network. They are shutting down our shields." "That is impossible. Our encryption, they broke it months ago. They have been inside our systems all along. They were just waiting." Above the Earth, the Valorian fleet suddenly went dark. Ship after ship lost power. Their shields flickered and died. Their weapon systems went offline. The greatest fleet in the Dominion's history was suddenly helpless. And then the humans came. They rose from the oceans in submarines. That should have been too primitive to matter. But these submarines had been modified. They carried missiles that had been redesigned with stolen Valorian technology. Missiles that could reach space. The first missile hit a Valorian cruiser amidships. The explosion was visible from Earth. In hidden bases around the world, more weapons fired. Some were old nuclear missiles, upgraded with alien tech. Some were entirely new, built in secret factories by engineers who had not seen the sun in months. All of them found their targets. On the ground, resistance fighters emerged from their hiding places. They had weapons now, real weapons, not just hunting rifles and homemade bombs. They had vehicles. They had armor. They had a plan. In the Himalayas, a team of soldiers climbed a mountain in the darkness. At the top was a Valorian ground command post, protected by shields and guards and automated defenses. It should have been impossible to attack, but the soldiers had trained for this specific mission for 3 months. They had memorized every detail of the base. They knew exactly when the guards changed shifts. They knew exactly which systems would fail when the cyber attack hit. At 12:15 a.m., the shields went down. The soldiers attacked. It was not a clean fight. Many of them died. But when the sun rose, the command post was in human hands. And with it, the Valorians lost control of their entire Asian operation. High Commander Zorath watched the reports coming in from around the world. Red lights were appearing everywhere, but now they represented his own forces in trouble. His beautiful fleet was being torn apart. His ground bases were falling one by one. "How is this possible?" he asked. His voice was quiet. He was not angry anymore. He was simply amazed. They had nothing. A year ago, they had nothing. How did they build all of this? His advisor Korath answered, "They are humans. They do not wait for permission to act. They do not need a central command to organize. Give a human a problem, and they will try to solve it. Give 1,000 humans the same problem, and they will find 1,000 different solutions. We have never faced anything like them." In orbit above Earth, something extraordinary was happening. A ship was rising from the planet's surface. It was ugly. It was clearly built from a dozen different pieces, welded together by desperate hands. One section was from an old space shuttle. Another was from a Valorian dropship that had been shot down and salvaged. It should not have been able to fly. But it was flying. The ship's captain was a woman named Maria Santos. She had been an astronaut before the invasion. When the aliens came, she had lost her husband and her home. She had spent a year living in caves and fighting with the resistance. Now she was going to space again. "All systems are holding," her engineer reported. His name was James, and before the war, he had been an accountant. He had taught himself engineering from books and captured alien manuals. "We have maybe 20 minutes before something breaks." 20 minutes is enough, Maria said. Their target was the Valorian flagship, the Eternal Victory. It was the biggest ship in the fleet, and it was currently without shields. It was also where High Commander Zorath had his backup command center. The little human ship flew straight at it. Valorian gunners tried to shoot it down, but their targeting systems were still offline. A few manual shots came close, but Maria was a better pilot than any computer. She dodged and weaved through the fire, getting closer and closer. "What are they doing?" Zorath asked, watching from the ground. "That ship cannot hurt the Eternal Victory. It is too small. It has no weapons." Korath understood before his commander did. "They are not trying to shoot it. They are going to ram it." Maria Santos looked at her crew. There were 12 of them. Scientists, soldiers, a teacher, a chef. All volunteers. All of them knew they were not coming back. "It has been an honor," she said. "The honor is ours," James replied. The little ship hit the Eternal Victory at full speed. The explosion tore through 3 decks. It destroyed the backup command center, killed 200 Valorian officers, and started fires that would burn for days. On the ground, humans who had been watching through telescopes saw the flash. They cheered. They wept. They said prayers for the crew that had sacrificed everything. High Commander Zorath sat in his bunker, surrounded by the sounds of defeat. His fleet was crippled. His ground forces were being overwhelmed. His command structure was in chaos. For the first time in 300 years of war, he considered the unthinkable. "Contact the human leadership," he said quietly. "Tell them we wish to discuss terms." His officers stared at him in shock. Valorians did not negotiate. Valorians did not surrender. But Zorath had learned something in the past year. He had learned that there were some enemies you could not defeat. Not because they were stronger or smarter, but because they simply would not stop. Because they would burn their own ships to win. Because they would laugh at death and fight with their bare hands if they had to. Humans were such an enemy, and Zorath was tired of losing. "Send the message," he repeated. "It is time to end this war." Aliens were ready for battle. They weren't ready for mankind. Part 5. The Terms of Surrender. Meeting took place on an asteroid between Earth and Mars. It had no name, just a number. The humans had suggested it. They wanted neutral ground, and there was nothing more neutral than a rock floating in the emptiness of space. The Valorian shuttle arrived first. It was sleek and silver, perfect in every way. High Commander Zorath stepped out with 3 of his senior officers. They wore their finest uniforms. Even in defeat, they had their dignity. The human shuttle arrived 5 minutes later. It was ugly. Parts of it did not match. It made strange noises as it landed. But it landed perfectly, and that was what mattered. The human delegation stepped out, and Zorath studied them carefully. There were 6 of them. He recognized some from intelligence reports. General Thomas Wright, the American military commander who had organized the final offensive. He was tall and gray-haired, with tired eyes that had seen too much death. Dr. Sarah Chun, the scientist who had reverse-engineered Valorian technology. She was small and thin, still wearing the same lab coat she had worn during the war. Ambassador Yuki Tanaka from Japan, who would handle the actual negotiations. She had been a diplomat for 30 years and had never lost her composure. Colonel Alexei Volkov from Russia, who had led the guerrilla forces in Europe. He had a scar across his face from a Valorian energy weapon. Professor Kwame Asante from Ghana, a philosopher and ethicist who would help decide the terms of peace. And finally, there was a grandmother from Kenya named Grace Okonkwo. Zorath did not understand why she was there. She was not a soldier or a scientist or a diplomat. But the humans had insisted she come. They sat across from each other at a table that had been set up inside the asteroid's small shelter. The air was recycled and cold. The lights were harsh. It was not a comfortable place for such an important moment. Zorath spoke first. I am High Commander Zorath of the Valorian Dominion. I have come to discuss the end of hostilities between our peoples. Ambassador Tanaka nodded. We appreciate your willingness to talk. But let us be clear about something. We are not here to negotiate surrender. We are here to accept yours. The Valorian officers shifted uncomfortably. This was not how defeated species were supposed to speak. But Zorath raised a hand to calm them. You are correct, he said. We are the ones who must surrender. I acknowledge this. He paused. But I would like to understand something first. Will you explain to me how this happened? The humans looked at each other. It was a reasonable question. They had won, but even they were not entirely sure how. General Wright spoke. We fought. We did not stop fighting. That is all. But you should have lost, Zorath said. Our technology was superior. Our numbers were greater. Every model we had said you would fall within weeks. Every species we have ever encountered would have surrendered under the pressure you faced. Why did you not? There was a long silence. Then Grace Okonkwo, the Kenyan grandmother, leaned forward. Zorath looked at her curiously. What could this old woman possibly add? Let me tell you a story, she said. When I was a young girl, my country was not free. We were ruled by people from far away who thought they were better than us. They had better weapons. They had more money. They had all the power. She smiled at the memory. But they did not have our spirit. We fought them in small ways and big ways. We went to prison and we died and we kept fighting. And in the end, we won. Not because we were stronger, but because we refused to accept that we were weak. She looked directly at Zorath. You came to our world and told us we had no choice. But humans always have a choice. We can choose to fight even when fighting's foolish. We can choose to hope even when hope makes no sense. That is what you never understood about us. Zorath was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head, a gesture of respect that he had not shown to any non-Valorian in his 300 years of life. I understand now, he said. We were ready for battle. We had prepared for every weapon, every tactic, every strategy. But we were not prepared for you, for a species that would rather die than kneel. The negotiations lasted 3 days. The terms were fair, all things considered. The Valorian fleet would leave Earth's solar system and never return. They would release all human prisoners. They would share certain technologies as payment for the damage they had caused. And they would send a message to every species in their network, warning them about humanity. On the final day, before he left, Zorath asked to speak with Grace Okonkwo alone. They walked to the edge of the asteroid shelter and looked out at the stars. My people will ask me what humans are like, he said. How should I describe you? Grace thought about this. Tell them we are stubborn. Tell them we are foolish. Tell them we fight each other almost as much as we fight our enemies. She smiled. And tell them that if they ever threaten our children, we will come for them. Not in a year. Not in a century. We will find them, no matter how long it takes, and we will make them regret it. Zorath nodded slowly. I will tell them. I do not think any of them will be eager to test your words. The Valorian fleet left Earth 1 week later. They took their dead with them, as was their custom. They left behind the ruins of their invasion and the seeds of a new relationship between their species and humanity. High Commander Zorath recorded a message before he entered faster-than-light travel. It was broadcast to every system in the Dominion, to every species they had ever contacted or conquered. Attention all vessels and colonies of the Valorian Dominion. Avoid the third planet of the Sol system. The beings there call themselves humans. They are not like other species. They do not calculate odds or weigh their chances of survival. They fight when fighting is hopeless. They hope when hope is gone. They laugh in the face of death and love in the midst of destruction. He paused, remembering everything he had seen. The taxi driver who drove into his soldiers. The grandmother who led a resistance cell. The scientist who worked without sleep. The crew that flew their ship into his flagship. Do not mistake their divisions for weakness. Their chaos is their strength. Every human is an army of one. And together, they are unstoppable. Leave them alone. This is not a suggestion. It is a warning. I have seen what they can do. They are far more dangerous than they appear. The message spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Species that had never heard of Earth learned about the strange blue planet and its stubborn inhabitants. Some were curious. Some were afraid. Some were inspired. And on Earth, humans began to rebuild. They buried their dead. They healed their wounded. They replanted their gardens and rebuilt their cities and started to dream again. They had won. Not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were human. And humans never give up.